Hello and welcome to another ABiQ webinar. This time we are looking at the supply chain in Sub-Saharan Africa, and I'm absolutely delighted to have with us today Tyrone Coote, who is a Vice President at ABiQ. Tyrone, maybe if I can give you a couple of minutes to just maybe introduce yourself, your company, and maybe a bit more background in terms of your interest and focus on Sub-Saharan Africa.
Thanks, Emil, and thank you for the opportunity. We appreciate it. So just briefly on me, I've been in Aramex for about 20 years. So I worked for a company in South Africa called Burka Express for 10 years, and then Aramex bought us out 10 years ago. So add the two together, it's 20 years. Aramex itself turning 40 next year, so a global organization. We've recently had a bit of a restructure, which was a nice focus for the business, where we've taken the globe and split it into 8, and the 8 really is zone focused, and there's a vice president running each one of those. So my portfolio is Sub-Saharan Africa. There's 48 countries that fall under that. One of my operations guys argues with me, he says it's 50. I think the answer is Africa keeps on changing. So somewhere in the high 40s. And as vice president, it's the total accountability for the Sub-Saharan Africa. In the continent, we would have owned stations where Aramex owns 100% the business. Then we have franchises. It's about 21 of the countries where we have franchises. And then the rest, we've got GDA partnerships. So GDA is the Global Distribution Alliance. And those partnerships would be with local companies that we've been using for the last 5, 10, 15 years. So that's the split. Our growth plans, and again, I'm just going to talk Sub-Saharan Africa, is to take those franchises, grow them as businesses, and then purchase those businesses outright. We don't send expats in to go and run countries. We either work with a local company or we buy a local company. And the main thing is we want to insist that the staff stay in that business. So, and that's the type of business that we're looking for. Full supply chain logistics for Aramex, which means freight, air, land, sea, rail. It's clearances, it's express, small parcels, domestic markets, and then a lot of verticals that we cover in healthcare, oil and gas, packaging. So that's us, we have country managers running these countries and going well. Even in the last 2 years, I think it's been going really well.
Well, that's fortunate. I think maybe, everybody's kind of a bit tired talking about COVID, but maybe from a supply chain point of view, and I know supply chain is kind of everywhere in the news at the moment. You look at congestion in ports, you've got backlogs on chips being shipped out of places and manufactured, and who knows what else. But maybe just how was Sub-Saharan Africa affected by COVID? How did Aramex experience COVID-19 in Sub-Saharan Africa?
So really bad and really good is my answer. I know I sound like a politician. You can imagine in the height of COVID, flights were restricted. And people would focus on real big emerging markets. So if they were canning flights, if there was 3 in the UK, they'll can 1 or 2. If there's 3 in Africa, they'll can all 3. So that had a major impact. And then sea lines also not stopped, but massively reduced and held back. So Africa, as I always describe it to people, it's an import destination. It really is an island. If you don't bring it there, you won't find it there. So there's been a significant impact on freight and imports into Africa. But the upside is that local has boomed. So local businesses, because now you can't buy imported goods and you had to support local, and that's been good. I mean, e-commerce, not just in Sub-Saharan Africa, but around the world, it's gone through the roof, through the ceiling. So if you had a good domestic business and a nice footprint and a nice last mile, your business would be doing well. I say that as an overall, I mean, every country is different. South Africa, where I'm from originally, there were other impacts, not just COVID. There's load shedding and looting and rioting and all other things that's had an impact. So restriction of movements. We are fortunate. We do play in the market of essential goods. So pharma, healthcare can't stay ahead of that type of deliveries, as you can imagine. But then other industries have been affected. People aren't buying new cars. They're not buying houses. The lawyers have gone quiet and things like that. So I think the overall picture has been, if you were only in freight, you would have had a really tough time. If you were in domestic e-commerce local markets, you've probably done okay. Yeah.
What is your standout market from that perspective?
So I mean, last year I was involved with Australia and New Zealand, so I'll just touch on them a bit. We've had too many shipments to deliver. We actually had to go onto national television and ask people who were at home being paid to be at home because of COVID. I'm talking about teachers and professional people. And we had to ask them to come and help us deliver shipments, running a Uber-style type of business. The type of industries were your IKEA type of business, flat pack furniture. People were setting up offices everywhere. So that has been really strong. And then e-commerce, people sitting at home, being fully paid and not having anything to do, have gone online. And you've seen significant spikes in your Amazons, Namshis, Shein types of business. So South Africa is the same. South Africa has done extremely well in this period because of exactly the same reasons. People sitting at home, having some money to spend, and e-commerce booming significantly. Ghana, I was telling Emil offline, visited it recently. It's such a great country, strong, good, safe. As African countries go, we have many challenges, but Ghana seems one of the shining lights. So we've done extremely well there with express small shipments coming into the country from the States. The lines, because of the volumes that were high, the lines were kept open. Yeah, and Mauritius, the islands. So again, there's some GDP per capita to spend. Your Reunion, Seychelles, Mauritius. Locally, people have done well. Tourism is obviously killed. No one could get into the islands, but if you're in there and you had a business, you were doing well. Tourism has taken a huge negative dive globally. But locally, people have been supporting their own countries because they can't leave the country most of the time, and the tourism industry has understood that that's the one way to keep it alive. So, yeah, Botswana done well. There's a few. I think if you're landlocked and if you had challenges before COVID, the challenges kept on. I think, pre-COVID, the majority of African countries' GDP was growing at double-digit rates, so great success stories. And Africa is robust. They face many other challenges. COVID, as horrible as it's been, it's just another challenge in Africa, and I think people accept those challenges. So yeah.
Okay, that's really good to hear, or reassuring to hear. Again, you mentioned a couple of countries. Is there, if we go maybe down to regions, can you draw a comparison between? And I don't know how you categorize Africa or the countries. Do you have East, West, Central, Southern? We kind of follow the UN, guidelines there. So we do have East, West, Central Africa, which is effectively from Central Africa all the way down to Angola, but kind of on the western trunk, if you like, and then East Africa. So of those regions, which can you see where there's a boom or a change or a fundamental change in movement of goods and people? Well, people maybe not as much, but certainly in terms of trade.
Yeah, so we see it as East, West, Central, South, because I'm obviously sub-Saharan, so North doesn't follow me. And there's specific gateways. So the West is definitely Ghana, Nigeria. The East will be your Kenya, Tanzania. South would be South Africa, and then feeding into Southern Africa, and then Central is the rest. Southern Africa, definitely the best performing by far. Again, as I said, being an ex-South African, we sometimes complain about how tough it is in our country until you travel Africa and sometimes the rest of the world, you realize that it's actually economy is still doing really well in South Africa. And because of that, feeding Namibia, Botswana, Mozambique. We've got an agent that we use in Zimbabwe, and their business does better than it does in Angola, which is perception. So yeah, so the southern region, absolutely the shining star, and then west, as I've said, Ghana extremely strong. Nigeria, many challenges and many opportunities. I think if we can improve a bit in Nigeria, the sky's the limit. The biggest economy in Africa, 250 million people. So south, west, then east, doing okay. Central's challenged. If you ask me where we're really battling, it's Central Africa. We and everyone.
You know, let's touch on those challenges. What are those challenges?
So, I mean, logistics, which hopefully we can solve, is one of the biggest ones. And then there's others, economy. So the top 5% in any African country is affluent and has got money to spend. And these will be the people that will pay for imported goods. Challenges are that the payment methods are sometimes a bit of a hindrance. And if they go online, I mean, the world has become very small. You can sit anywhere in the world with Wi-Fi and go online, but many countries refuse to even send goods into Africa. So from the States, probably half of the online retailers will not send goods into Africa. They don't trust that it will be paid and things like that. So there's a trust issue. There's a poverty issue. If you ignore the top 5%, the other 95% are battling. It's not a continent that's rich. Logistically, it's not the distances, it's the travel. I mean, in Ghana, I was there for 3 days. The first 2 days we would drive around and it was okay. I think the third day, to travel 4 kilometers took us 2 hours just because of traffic. So we operate as Aramex in the majority of those countries with motorbikes, motorcycles, sometimes three-wheelers. And the main reason is just because of the traffic. So I think those are the major ones. There's infrastructure and investment is required. We know that the Chinese have been investing in Africa for the last 15 years, and thank goodness for that, ports and railways and that, but there's much more needed. And yeah, I mean, I don't think, and it's a perception, I don't think if you're sitting in Europe or sitting in the States, you are super excited to open up a business in Africa, especially if you've never visited it. And once you've been there and you walked in a mall in Accra and seen, but this mall looks exactly the same as it does in Dubai or in New York, you realize, wow, you know, this can work. So perception, logistics, economy, language is French is obviously a very strong requirement in the Francophone countries and not always realized. I've seen people fight with each other in English and French, and only when they start speaking the same language does it get resolved. So language is sometimes a challenge. Logistics, if it's the capital, if it's to port, it's actually quite simple. The moment you want to move out of it, it becomes tough. Yeah, I mean, 80% of your commerce will probably be in your main capital centers. The other 20% is out and battling to grow because of, again, perceptions and the logistics around it. But it's Africa also finds a way. I know there's an amazing talk, I think, by Melinda Gates on Coca-Cola and how Coca-Cola distributes in Africa. And it's, you know, they drive to a central point and people arrive and they take crates of Coke on bicycles and wheelbarrows and an ambulance and a police van, and it goes out, and the next month they come and fetch it. So Africa also finds a way to make things work. Yeah.
Looking at that, you know, we talked about domestic. Is there, you know, if you know, I understand if you have a domestic business that was thriving and obviously with the lockdowns couldn't get goods in from abroad, which is fine. Do you think that as a result of COVID that there's probably more startups, entrepreneurs, or more things being made local rather than imported? Do you see a change in that? So,
I mean, COVID's not past, so and who knows how long it's still going to be around with us. So, but people have been forced into that. So going back. Again, I remember the days when people worked in factories and they used to sew clothes, and that was a big thing before people started importing. So that type of thing has had to go back. I don't know what the final result will be after COVID, but I am hoping that does happen, that people support locally, not just tourism, but support local produce and things like that. But again, one of Africa's, as I said, it's an import destination. What Africa's got is resources and materials that gets exported and then turned into final products and then bought by Africans and brought back. And one thing that Africa should realize is that why not do it ourselves? And that we should be having overseas investors with knowledge and capital to come into our countries and build last mile, final mile factories that we don't have to export and buy our own raw materials back. So I'm not answering your question straight because I don't know what the final effect will be. I've seen people going to local because they've been forced into it. But as the markets are opening up, I assume that, I mean, there's many people that have around the world that used to import into Africa that now need to start sending their goods back in there. I'm hoping that will affect some of the prices, that some of those prices comes down, and some of the landlords can review some of their rental prices, because I mean, that's been a huge challenge for growth, growing markets and that. But my answer is I think it's too soon to say yes. And that's someone was asking about whether people will work from home in the future, and I'm saying they've been forced to, but I don't know if that will always continue. I think we need another year or so post-COVID to understand whether the market's completely changed.
Yeah, I think, I kind of want to touch on, I think, well, before I do, first of all, anybody out there that have some questions for Tyrone, please feel free to post them and we will get to them in about 15 minutes time. Coming back to the comment about, I don't know about you, I kind of, going back many years to when we did a bit of economy at school, probably still, we always said that there's kind of three main sectors or industries. I mean, okay, let's not look at the service sector, but if you look at an economy, there's agriculture, there's mining, and then there's industrial, or the manufacturing production side of it. And that was one of the things that I think South Africa did well back in the day, was that it developed all three of those quite well, to the extent that it was fairly self-sufficient. And that, for me, I think is to an extent lacking through most of the other sub-Saharan African countries. You have places like Zambia where there's loads of mining, but you don't hear much about, okay, there's a bit of agriculture and so on, but you don't hear much about the industrial side of it. Well, actually, the industrial side, for me, I think is lacking in most of the sub-Saharan Africans, with the exception probably of South Africa. And I think that is maybe a bit of a shortfall for sub-Saharan Africa to, specifically in economy and growth, which they need to focus on. They have to invest in the skill set and the capacity. And I think one thing that COVID, for me personally, has shown is that you cannot rely on the far or the East to be your single source of parts, material, or whatever else you want to put into your factories. I mean, you can have factories in Europe or wherever else, and they ground to an halt because they couldn't get materials out of one single country. For me, that is a failed supply chain, or maybe exposed, which I think, COVID exposed. And, subsequently, I think this is an opportunity, I might have said it before, but this is an opportunity for progressive African countries to put up their hand and say, hang on, we mine these materials already, teach us and, help us to process them, and then ship it out. So you build an alternative, supply chain, which I think is critical. But also, on the back of that, it's quite interesting to note, in the week, there was an article posted, it might have been on Bloomberg or one of the other news channels, about the DRC has now announced that none of their raw materials are allowed to be exported. DRC is a big country, so anything mined in there has to be processed there. And I guess the question is, in what state will it be exported? Does it have to be a finished product, or has it be half processed? What is that definition, or how is that going to work? But I think there's certainly countries taking note of that. And I think obviously for you, from a supply chain, you guys are supply chain specialists, that, is always an opportunity. It's how do you view that? And, in terms of discussions in those markets, what does the leaders tell you in those countries? Is that something that they're looking at, considering? Because I certainly haven't heard too much about it, although I do think it's an opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, as you were speaking, there's like three answers that's coming up. First of all, I'm going to sound a bit contradictory. As someone that's in supply chain, we love the fact that things move out of Africa and back into Africa, so because that's our business. As a son of Africa, born and bred, and where my heart is, the answer is, well, that can't continue. And if it does continue, some of the financial wins and gains needs to stay in those countries. So, I mean, I think if you mine something for $10, probably $1 stays in the country and 9 leaves. You know, that's and that even in South Africa it was that. You know, the country I think with the most diamonds, or the second most diamonds in the world, those diamonds were leaving South Africa and not necessarily the money being spent in South Africa on the population. So I think as a supply chain specialist, we've been threatened. I've been in this industry for more than 20 years. And we've always been threatened with supply chain is going to go down. I remember the fax machine. Some people won't even know what that is. And we were told when the fax machine came out, that's it. Supply chain and letters and mail is gone. And then e-commerce started. But I do agree with what you're originally stating. And there was a previous president of South Africa, Thabo Mbeki, who spoke at the United Nations. And it was an amazing speech. His comments were, don't give money to Africa if the country is not well run. If it's a well-run country, give money to Africa. And he, instead of giving money because you feel guilty or you think you're helping, you're probably not helping in some of those countries. Wait for a country that's well run, good elections, good government, good health and safety policies, and taking care of human life, and no labor exploitation and things like that, and invest. But the investment must be exactly what you've said. The investment is not, I come and set up a mine, take all the diamonds and leave. I set up a mine and I actually make sure that the people who live in that country, because once the mining leaves, I mean, it takes very long to fix that soil again. And that. On the agricultural side, again, living in Dubai, I go to my local Waitrose or whatever, and when I look at the fruits there, they've got signs up from which countries they come, and they're all from African countries, and the most beautiful, amazing fruits. So it seems like the best fruits are exported to Dubai, at least, probably Europe and the States as well. Africa, 100%, and I mean, this is not perception, will feed the world in the future. You know, we've got the soil, we've got the manpower. It's how do we make sure that in feeding the world that it enriches the people where it's coming from. So, yeah.
I'm glad you touched on that, because I mean, I think that is again the failure, is the fact that the transport infrastructure doesn't exist. It would be interesting to see, you know, because you're going to have premium produce being, you know, farmed, you know, cultivated, exported, you know, to wherever. What's left, you know, because it's either in the perfect state or it's rotting on the fields, because the transport infrastructure is in the place. You take care after the good side, because you get premium dollar for that. But for the rest, you know, you'll leave it behind because you just simply doesn't have the capacity or the means to get it to a market that's functioning, that can feed domestic market or the domestic population. So yeah, I think you know, we kind of do repeat some of the stuff. You know, investment in transport infrastructure. Why do you have to invest? You know, thinking about the internet, everything is digital. You don't have to go anywhere. You even work from home. But that's not what it's about. You know, it's not just it's not the suburbs roads that's an issue. It's the country's transport network that's an issue, and that is going to remain an issue. You know, whether we're driving electric cars or electric tractors, doesn't matter. We need to invest in transport infrastructure. We need to get the means to get produce from the farms to the markets. You know, and food security is becoming more and more of an issue. We read more and more of it, and we can see that certainly through all the inflationary discussions. You know, there's talk about shelves being empty in the US. Who would have thought about that? You know, you really didn't think, you know, a year or 2 years ago about having a conversation about empty shelves in the UK, in, you know, US, everywhere. But yeah, so I think it is all contributing to the same issues, you know, in terms of investment, and then certainly the supply chain. I guess the opportunities are in abundance. What would you say is, I mean, obviously technology has made a big impact, or had a big impact in terms of streamlining. You know, you talked about the last mile delivery. Maybe you want to talk us through about some of the, because there is some very clever ways, you know, whether it's drones or whatever else for deliveries, and we see even in the UAE that they are setting up some regulation recently about last mile delivery through drones, you know. And we know that they've, for example, I'm trying to think, is malaria vaccines, I think, or medicines in Africa that's been tested to, you know, delivery through drones and so on. What is ABiQ, you know, doing on the investment side on technology for that last mile delivery? Is it something you're looking at? Have you come across anything, you know, that stood out in domestic markets where you thought, hang on, this is a brilliant way in terms of you know, coming up with a solution to a problem?
Yeah. So, I mean, if we just touch on drones, the conversation has been going for 10 years at least on drones. The challenge with drones is the distance they can travel and the weight they can carry and the cost of those drones. So I'm in meetings constantly with people asking us to either purchase drones or invest in their businesses. We've had invested in one in Australia. We had a small investment, and then there's a few other discussions that's ongoing. Drones in Africa for medicine is perfect. So what happens we have a big drought and then big rain, and bridges get washed away, and it's just impossible to get across. So definitely healthcare, pharmaceutical, medicine, tablets, things like that is light and it doesn't take up a lot of space, and you can fly that across a bridge when you have no other option. We haven't knocked it on the head as to normal courier. It's still too expensive, you know, to compare drone versus 20 motorbikes and cycles and even couriers that deliver on foot. It's just not cost effective to do that. But it is working, and it's an effective where you don't have another option, and you need urgent delivery, as in medicine that needs to get to a place ASAP. So that's just on the drone thing. That it's an ongoing conversation. I'm frustrated that it's taken us 10 years and we still don't have the final solution for that. That's everyone. That's not just ABiQ. As to technology is everything. Data is everything. You know, we have huge e-tailers and retailers, and yes, the conversation is what is your clearance capabilities, what is your last mile capabilities, but what they really want to know is, how do I know that shipment's been delivered? A lot of these shipments, the payment is affected on POD or on sign, so technology it needs that, and for that you need Wi-Fi, you need people that are connected. I think 5 years ago at a conference, got up and our CEO then said, we're not a logistics company, we're a tech company. So it's a huge part of our business, apps as in the same as everyone else. And logistics and supply chain is always about reducing costs. We're selling rates that I think we sold 10, 15 years ago. So you need to constantly be smart and create economies of scale and things like that. And that is by, don't go to someone's house 3 times, you know, deliver it when the person is there, or have a drop-off and collection point. The person picks it up at their convenience. So how can you take costs out of it? Predictive analytics that we're using in it. Countries are all different, but when are people home and when would they want a delivery, so that you reach them with that? Making sure that as deliveries, and I'm talking about e-commerce, small shipments, small parcels, make sure that if shipment's on its way to someone's address, they have the option to opt out and say, I'm not there, take it here. So give them an alternative or hold it for me, that sort of thing. So that's a constant. And then, as I said earlier, payment and payment gateways and making payment easy is one of the most critical things in Africa. The perceptions people don't have money, they do. I'm not saying it's in abundance and it's lying around, but they do and they want to spend. But they don't have access to credit cards. Again, I'm talking about the majority population, not the 5%. Don't have access to credit cards or debit cards for that matter. So they want to deal with other currencies. And we investing more money in technology than we would in getting cars that are faster or smarter or bigger, because those are the places where we can affect costs. We can't change fuel. We are investing in electrical vehicles, but as you said, it's still a vehicle. You still have the same challenges as in traffic and things like that. So yeah, we're the same as every other business. Data is king.
Have you come across any, because you did say that you would either buy or partner with, domestic operators. Is there any of those that you come across where you thought, hang on, they got a clever way in terms of dealing with this sort of problem, which you could actually adopt and roll out through the rest of the business?
They not technology-wise, but they do. There's no one who knows how to deliver better than someone in his own backyard. So those are the smarts that we do find. People are smart in how they do it, and we are talking in quite a few countries to do JVs with businesses where there's foot traffic. It's your type of Pudo drop-off stations. Sitting in South Africa or sitting in Dubai, you would think of something that makes sense. So if it's courier, maybe something that does stationary or business. But in traveling in Africa, what I realized it's the people that sell gas, and they have people that come in with gas canisters because they cook on it, and because they have a lot of foot traffic, they're saying, well, why don't you just open up a drop-off station now for courier parcels? So that type of local smarts is amazing, and it's an eye-opener, and it's as I've said, I use the example of Coca-Cola, how Africa makes things work. Technology not necessary. Technology for now, and I'm saying this with respect because I'm not all over and I don't know everything, but technology is what we need to bring into Africa more than what we're finding here at the moment, I think.
Part of the network. I think we've got about 5 minutes left. Just two topics I'd like to touch on. The first one would be, what is your outlook for let's say 2022 in terms of supply chain issues? There's so much talk about it. How long before all this goes to bed, before this is sorted?
So supply chain is never fully sorted, and Africa most than any other place. Emile, I think it's going to take a while. Some of the roadblocks at the moment is because of everything closes and then everything opens up at the same time. So it's this build-up. I know we had in South Africa, we had a lockdown on alcohol sales. People could buy online, but you couldn't deliver it. So they were buying online, and we were keeping it in our facilities. And then one Sunday, the president said, you can sell alcohol tomorrow. And those clients phoned the next day and said, where's my wine that I ordered 3 weeks ago? You didn't want to come close to our facilities for the next 2 weeks. So the backlog wasn't because of inefficiency. It was just, the thing opens up. So, and that's happening at ports now. Closed down. Everyone has lost money. Now they're opening up, and everyone's saying, let's get this out and buy it. And we're coming up to our peak and our festive season. So that's part of those challenges. And then costs. There was an oversupply of airlines and sea lines before COVID. That reduced significantly, and the cost went through the ceiling. So, and we're an asset-light organization. We don't own ships and airplanes and things like that. So you're buying space, and that's become super expensive. I keep on seeing Emirates opening up more and more lines and putting more and more flights in everywhere. Until they do, and until everyone follows suit, and a lot of those passenger planes are now being converted into freighter planes, which is also exciting news for us. So there's a combination of peak happening. We've created our own festive by blocking everything and now opening it up, and people are ordering and they're wanting it now, and then not enough. We're not back to normal. To answer your question, Emile, I don't see 2022 us being back to normal. I see it improving throughout 2022. Hopefully early 2023, in a post-COVID world, which we're all praying for, we will be back to what is the new normal. And some things have changed, which is good as well. And some lines have changed. And as I said, if you're smart and you've invested locally, you're not going to have such a big requirement to import anymore, export anymore. So, yeah. But I don't think we've seen it now. If you look at the COVID stats in Europe and UK, we're talking 40,000 people getting COVID in the UK a day. we're very far from a post-COVID world. I expect to see 2022 the same thing. If it's winter somewhere, you'll have big COVID with restrictions, and those restrictions are restrictions on flight and entry and things like that.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Let me just quickly go through. We've got quite a number of questions here. So maybe let's just go quickly through that. So the first one is South Africa focused, already the second largest exporter into sub-Saharan Africa, and China with a share of about 6.5% of total sub-Saharan Africa imports. Do you see South Africa taking over the #1 place in the next decade, especially with the ACFA context? Yeah, so the free trade agreement, and why?
#1 in Africa, is that what they're asking?
Yeah, sub-Saharan Africa.
Sub-Saharan Africa. So South Africa is third. They used to be #1, and then Nigeria took the spot. Again, I'm not in the country, although my heart is in South Africa. It's where I've lived my whole life. I think South Africa have huge opportunities, but other challenges other than just COVID, and that will be which would hold them back to not taking over and being #1, because they got no other reason not to be it. A great economy, a great resources, all of those things, but there are challenges in the country other than COVID. So I'm saying there's no reason South Africa not to be #1. That would be my answer. But if you say, Tyron, will they do it? I'm saying they're going to have to address a few other challenges. Load shedding and lack of power being one of them. You know, a big part of that.
I think
reason, yeah.
This is kind of touched this. My second point from earlier is that have you seen an impact from the Africa Free Trade Agreement? And have you, I mean, obviously, in theory, the fee should be reduced. So I assume that, you know, from a legislative point of view, or from a compliance point of view, it should be easier to move goods from one point to the other. So have you seen anything along those lines? Is there any changes?
I haven't seen it myself, but it doesn't mean it hasn't happened. So, but I'm not aware that has had a material effect, and maybe it is because of COVID and other challenges that's still restricting the economies and stuff like that. But I haven't felt a spike because of it yet. No.
In terms of trade moving from, well, inter-Africa trade, because that's what it's all about, yeah.
And I mean, I see South Africa as being part of the challenge. It's extremely difficult to deal with customs in South Africa. Very legislative, very slow. So if I was in other countries, I would be frustrated with South Africa and getting things in and out of South Africa at the moment. But the simple answer is I haven't seen a specific benefit yet. No.
Okay, that's quite interesting to see. So another question: where do you see the biggest opportunities for building systems, you know, constructions across Southern Africa? So obviously projects across Southern or Sub-Saharan Africa, specifically related to smart cities and energy management.
So, I mean, I think ABiQ might be better to answer this.
Well,
I know our President Ramaphosa in South Africa spoke about building a smart city, and people were saying we need to fix the cities we've got first. The opportunities will exist in every one of the countries in Africa. If you look at the top economies, that's where it will happen first. So if you're looking at your Nigeria, your Ghana, your South Africa, your Ethiopia, the biggest economies is where this will take place, where they because you need to address the basics first before you can start talking smart cities, stuff like that. But there's a need in every one of the countries. If you wanted to put your money somewhere, go to the top 10 economies.
Yeah, I think, I mean, having touched on it now, I mean, I quickly had a look there. I mean, at the moment, we've got just, you know, okay, let's talk project specifically. This is, you know, building infrastructure, building real estate, you know, oil and gas, doesn't matter, anything construction related. So you sit with about $1.3 trillion worth of active and upcoming project opportunities across Sub-Saharan Africa. You know, we've got about $650 billion worth of projects under construction at the moment, and well over, you know, 700 billion that is upcoming. You know, so there's more coming up than what's currently being built. It's obviously good news as we want. Yeah, it's the growth curve. In terms of physical movement of stuff, like, lights and fittings and stuff, I mean, I assume that's more containers moving around. How exposed are you to that? I mean, obviously, yeah, you do all the parcels and the smaller stuff, or the express part of it, but how big a part of your business is the bigger stuff, moving containers of materials from one country to another or city to another?
So for Aramex globally, this business was built on freight. So freight is the biggest portion of our business on a global scale. In Africa, it's not necessarily full containers, but freight is a significant portion of our business. Again, different in different areas. If I use Ghana as an example, the Aramex business will probably be 40 to 50% of their business will be freight related, which will be everything from full containers to half containers and things like that. So the restrictions, again, the restrictions is not on the container or necessarily on the country, it's always on the commodity. So depending on the commodity, customs needs to check it, and we work very closely with all these countries to ensure that we're not assisting with the movement of drugs and contraband and illegal goods and things like that. But getting the container to the port and clearing through the port, I'm saying with respect, is actually quite simple. It is the movement from there further that when you put it in trucks that there are challenges. But no, freight freight is how we feed the world and how we move goods and how we move bulk stuff. So it's a big part of our business, and it's the growth part of our business as well.
And I think obviously, looking at, I spoke to somebody over the weekend. If you consider places like Central Africa, where over the next 10 years, the Central African population is going to grow by 30%. So if you think about it, in 10 years' time, a third of Central Africa's population is younger than 10 years of age. Yeah. Can you imagine for a young population like that, that's growing so rapidly, everything that's required? It's everything that's required. It's from places to stay, to work, to learn, to eat, everything.
The average age, I think someone was saying, is between 18 and 19 in Africa, and the average age in Europe is 42 or 44 years. So less than half of that. So that growth is not just happening in opportunities and resources on that, but actually in population as well. And it's, as you said, stop the perceptions about Africa, that the young Africans have got cell phones, they've got access to information, they're hip, and they're Gen Zs and they're millennials, and they know what's going on and they know what they want. And hopefully we can get some of the brains that we've lost in these African countries to come back. It happened in Beirut during the war, where people left and then they came back and they rebuilt Beirut. I know it's challenging at the moment, but when I was there 10 years ago, that was the success story. But all the intellect that came back to Beirut to come and build a country, so we need that as well. But
I guess it's a different conversation. I mean, I think we had similar conversations about a country that came out of sanctions a couple of years ago, Sudan. And unfortunately, the events of the last month or so has means that suddenly that market is kind of taking a step back again. Has that impacted you, or events like that? I mean, because it's not the only place. You had Mali, you had there's at least 2 coups this year so far in terms of
Uganda. We got serious concerns. We had bombs exploded in the capital a few days ago, and it's the second event in the last 3 weeks. And again, I mean, the bombs have exploded and now it's finished. And when I talked to my country manager there, Sai, he says, Tyron, it's back to normal, but the perception now is the concern. Would you be going to Uganda if you were not from there? You'd think twice. So I mean, it is an ongoing thing. Africa, unfortunately, I referred back to what President ABiQ said. Support countries that run good governments, but South Africa is a place where you have coups and we have military interventions and things like that. And those countries are the countries that keep on going backwards and continue. There's a downward negative spiral with those countries. Ethiopia, there's some concerns at the moment. I know there's some messages of people saying get out. If you speak to the guys in Ethiopia, they're saying it's fine. It's more North Ethiopia than the capital itself. But And then, I mean, Emil, you know it yourself. You either choose to be in Africa or you choose to not be in there. I think what helps Aramex, we operate in Iraq and Beirut and Saudi and places all over Algeria and Liberia. So for us, Africa is not a scary place. It's we operate in scary places. So
yeah, no,
I think you need
fair enough.
to use it, and it's the people in the countries that you feel sorry for because they never get out of the situation because of what governments do to them. But we should send a message. If you run a well-run country, Botswana is the example. Invest in it, you know. And if the other African leaders ask why not me, say, well, you know, fix your country. Then I think that's the way to do it.
Well, I kind of agree with or support what you say there, because I mean, if there's examples of stable countries, international community must invest, because what is the message that you send by not doing it? And then especially like you just mentioned, you know, I always say that, especially with the youth, and it's an educated youth. Yeah, they might not have PhD degrees behind them. A lot of them do, but you know, it's more about what technology has brought them. The access to the internet has brought them a lot of, you know, information, knowledge, not always necessarily correct, but at least, you know, they have access to that, or different opinions. So they can challenge the status quo by not, you know, don't believe everything you hear. So I think, you know, that is going to, you know, change, and that is the opportunity in terms of Africa. You know, they are going to demand that, you know, politicians will have to be held accountable. But, you know, and having said that, you know, people want to have access, you know, to the internet device. You know, it doesn't help you have a smart device and you can't charge it, you know. So that investment in terms of the energy sector as well, you know, it's a region, renewable. I mean, and there's loads of renewable energy projects in sub-Saharan Africa. And I assume you guys, you know, some of them tend to be a bit remote, but it's still something that you deliver a service. And I mean, if it's in the jungles in the DRC, I assume you would be tasked with getting the solar panels there, one way or the other, along with probably batteries and so on.
Yeah. So Nigeria in our warehouse, our biggest client is all solar, and it is renewable. And if you think of Africa, the one thing we've got is sun. We've got a bit of sun in Africa, so that's just sun and wind and water if you're on the coast. So that is. And it is about convincing the rest of the world that this is happening, and it should have happened long ago. Stop digging for oil and charcoal and things like that. You know, in Africa we've got the biggest resource, we've got the sun, and that's how solar energy should work for us. And once you put that up, I mean, it just solves so many more problems. As you said, you know, that's the exact opposite of what's happening in South Africa with the lack of power and then lack of growth and manufacturing and that. If you can bring power to Africa, it solves huge problems, you know, to farming, agricultural, transport, all of those things. Yeah.
Across the board, yeah. Excellent. Well, thank you very much. I think we've answered most of the questions that we've had as well. And I know we all need to get back to our normal day jobs, but I really wanted to take the opportunity, Tyrone, to thank you for participating and for your insights. It's been really a pleasure to have you on this webinar.
I thank you for the opportunity. I think my final comments is that there's no such thing as an expert on Africa. People just have a body of knowledge because Africa keeps on changing. But if you want to be in an exciting place for the next 5 to 10 years, it is Africa. It's so positive about what's happening and developing and being fixed. It's not old and tired like some of the other regions. So I'm excited, and Emil, anytime, happy to share.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much. From ABiQ, have a wonderful day, everybody. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.